the
And we'll wrap this up from here,
yeah,
and then I'll
during
do some.
the run up to the 2025 elections, even Kamala Harris was saying we need to be a more lethal military. Like I think that what Trump does give in lethality, he loses in trust because no one understands exactly when he's going to change his mind. And he seems like to be a slave to public opinion in a way that other leaders just were not. And I think that we can see this with the Iran stuff. I don't know if he even has an end goal here, and it's going to be when he feels like when he gets bored.
Well,
and that's a real problem.
Trump is very, very tough to read. Every time I've thought I knew what he was thinking, I've been wrong more often than I've been right. So I try not to get into like predictions in that way. But all I'll say about that, and I know, Sarah, you want to move on, is that like one of the things that we often do that I think is a mistake in this era of modern war is we say, like, we'll go into a country, we'll be like, victory is when we win in exactly 2 weeks. More than 2 weeks is a crushing defeat on America's part. And then the other country goes, oh shit, so we just need to last 2 weeks? And then they know exactly what to propagandize. I think we give them targets for asymmetrical retaliation because they're trying to win a war of, as I think we agreed, terrorist reprisals, propaganda, and cockroach survival. And being a little bit ambiguous about what your goals are actually makes that a little bit harder. It might make it harder to sell it to the American people. But as a strategy, I think it's worth trying, to be honest with you.
I do have to use the restroom and get something real quick. So
yep, no problem. I don't have any questions on the front nose. Yep, no problem. How do you say his name?
Rizufso.
Well, he sent out a wonderful 10 memberships for the Ryanators over there. Spin City, who is hanging out backstage, ready to come up. He was first one backstage. I know he's been probably screaming from the chat. Sends in a big 10, says Libtardia within the first 5 minutes. I think that was shots fired to Wick during his opening statements. Simon Hectic sending a big 5 says, go Sarah, great subject. It was. I was really excited. That's why I reached out to you on this one, Ryan, because I feel like the international law kind of needs to be debunked almost. In like I was noticing in this space, a lot of people kept saying international law, international. It's like, but is it, or do we have to, you know? John sending in the big 5 says, I know Tomato is going to take this as said because I gave you money, but it's not my money I'm using, LOL, but your show still sucks. Okay. And then he also sends in another 10 to say more of her money because Toasty Man Bad said so. Fair enough.
I support you donating, but you may be drunk.
Very, very true. Caledonian says at the big 5, international law is the legal corollary of game theory. Once you throw out the rules, victory favors the most irrational and brutal. Any thoughts to that?
I mean, I think what international law is like very, very soft rules of the game. It's always going to exist. We had the Treaty of Westphalia before we had modern international law. It's not a question of whether international law will exist or will be thrown out. It's a question of what the new rules are, right? So I think Wick and I agree on this also. There's the honest question is whether the current rules favor the U.S. sufficient that we ought maintain them, because if they don't, then we should set up new rules.
Yeah, that's kind of the pondering I have in that instance of if the rules apply, but there is no enforcement arm, then are they really rules anyways? And if so, why are we operating under that level? I mean, it's only really to the people who don't have the enforcement to not, like, who can't afford to not follow them.
Yeah. When I was in law school, I was in law school when Russia invaded Crimea. And I was actually taking international law. So we had a Russian legal professor came in and gave a lecture, and he was explaining the Russian view of law, which is legal positivism, which is exactly what you just said, Sarah. Like, the question is not what does the document say? It's what is the enforcement mechanism? And It's tricky because I'm not insensitive to Wick's argument, where it's like if China's taking that positive position and Russia's taking the positive position, maybe the US can win through soft power if it doesn't take the positive position. But then we have the problem of the fact that Russia and China were both asserting their power and ascending during this time period. So, and that's why the TPP is the great what if, because whatever the rules of the game were, they were insufficient to prevent our adversaries from doing what they did. So maybe that means you should come up with new rules, and I guess you have to figure out what those are.
I guess the question I have is we have a system of laws that currently allow murder still exists, even though we have a law against murder. It's not sufficient to prevent all murderers from doing murder. And yet we still have those laws, and I would argue it's a good thing we have those laws, right? And we don't punish, and sometimes murderers get off because we have a system of rights in place, but it is still good that we prosecute them, even though it's not a perfect system. And this argument that Russia and China were able to game the system to some extent, I'm sympathetic as well. It's annoying. It's frustrating. But I don't think that's an excuse to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, no, but this is why I wanted to take this topic, because I think that there's a misconception where people conflate international law with domestic law as if there was some equivalency. Like the way what China was doing is, let's say you're playing Monopoly, right? And you're like, oh, this game is so fun. Let's all play Monopoly. You take a few turns, and then China just reaches into the till and takes all the money. And you go, hey, China, if you do that, I'll stop playing with you. And they go, yeah, and they just do it again. At a certain point, you're going to realize that there's no enforcement mechanism for the rules of Monopoly other than I don't want to play with you anymore. And they don't seem to give a fuck about that. In the US context, the good news is murderers don't get to dictate whether we have murder rules unilaterally. You murderers don't get to say, I don't like murder law, so therefore I'm immune to murder law. But China does. Russia does.
But
so
that's
the problem we're trying to solve.
To these laws, which I'm in favor of, to be clear. This is just an argument is that we should enforce it more. Yes, we should.
But who's gonna enforce it?
Pax Americana, baby. That's why we need to be the world police once again. Okay.
The reason that China and Russia got us in a bind on this, and they did. They spotted a weakness in the system. They were pushing to get the same treatment we demand. We won't be bound by international law. And here's the thing, Wick, we're right. It would be insane and unconstitutional. I don't even think we can submit to these authorities in that way. Like, I don't think our law allows it. And even if our law did allow it, we shouldn't, because God, have you seen the UN General Assembly? It's a gang of thieves. It's a fucking nightmare. So what they started realizing is they were like, no, the international law is set up so that the great powers can ignore it when they want to. We are great powers, therefore we will ignore it. And we were left saying, oh, we would appreciate it if you ignored it less. But we're not arguing that we can't ignore it, because of course we can and we want to.
But again, my argument is that we should be the sole arbiters of this international law and the sole enforcers as well. It was a mistake, and the mistake was letting China, even though I don't think we had a choice with Russia during the Cold War.
We didn't have a choice, yeah.
Absolutely. After the Cold War, we absolutely did have a choice. But China specifically, we had a choice. We didn't have to give them veto power in the Security Council. We did. I think that was the mistake. And I think that there is a question, right, of what are we willing to risk in order to enforce these international laws against bigger, stronger powers than we normally have. Like in Yugoslavia is a good example. Like, we risked war, we risked death, we risked destruction, but it was a good thing that we went in and we enforced international law in that case. And we said, no, you can't genocide your neighbors, buddies, right? You cannot do that. We will stop you from doing so. The failures that we're having and the weakness that Russia and China has seen isn't just our failures to enforce, though. It's our failures to comply. And they saw that and they weaponized that. They leveraged that to get soft power and contest soft with us in soft and hard power in various countries and places in the world because our non-compliance made it easier for them to do so.
The part of that I would agree on is that in a world where the US was able to unilaterally dictate international law, then I think we probably ought to comply with international law as well. But that is not, unfortunately, the world. And the truth is, if we had demanded that the US was the only power that had veto power in the Security Council, there would be no UN.
I know.
Right?
I think that would be okay to. Well, first of all, I think the UN is unfortunately not the best institution. And if the argument in our debate had been, should the UN
Persist.
yeah, I might be more. My answer might surprise you. I don't know if it would or not, right? But I do think that
No, you
just
served.
because
You served. I don't think I'd be that surprised.
I don't. Just because there is an institution that has failed in its duty does not mean that the concept that they were trying to uphold is a
No,
bad
but
concept.
that's what I've been trying to get at. The UN didn't fail. The UN is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is
I
not
disagree.
ever enforce anything against great powers ever. That was always the design. This wasn't a bug in the system. This was a feature. It was a
This
feature
is
of its
another
construction.
disagreement we have, though. I think that we did set up rules in place. So again, it was designed so that powers had an alternate route other than conflict in order to resolve their
Yeah.
differences, even with the greater powers. And the evidence that I would give that this is the case is because that branches, for lack of a better term, to the UN, such as the World Bank and the IMF and all these other things, they have ruled against the US and we have complied with it, right?
But
That
if
is
the
by design.
US
They've not been able to
wanted,
hold us to account.
if we wanted to have a governing world body that was super sovereign to the US and could actually rule contrary to us, we could have set it up. We could have set up a system where you needed a block of 2 or a block of 3 to veto, right? We didn't, because we wanted a system in which any great power could veto at the Security Council. It's not a design flaw, it's a design feature.
Yeah, but the
It's
UN
not like
Security
it's
Council is
failing
all
its
about
mission.
building-
It's just its mission was always this. And this is kind of the problem with international law, is that
you're
it
conflating
ossifies and the
international
world
law, like
changes
UN
and
is
then
the
countries ignore it.
Yeah, the UN is go ahead.
Let's go ahead and tuck that one. We'll put it in your pocket, and we can do that one during open panel because I think more
Sure.
people would have more to add into it. Over on the Buy Me a Coffee app, and of course, if you send it over on Buy Me a Coffee, you get way more characters to use over there. By the way, just saying. Cheetown Deke says to be hamstrung by other nations, regardless of their reliance of international laws to constrain us, is not good. Why? Because of most nations, because of most nations know there will be some sort of consequences for not doing things in the U.S. interest. Why give a chain to our enemies, paid, provided, and enforced by us to constrain us? Makes little sense to me. And if they don't like it, they can do something about it. China ignores international norms all the time, and unless the U.S. enforces those norms, nothing is done about it. And yet China is held in high esteem. Quick response from either of you?
Sure. China is not held in high esteem. There are plenty of countries worldwide that do not like and have been taking advantage of China. The idea that China is being held as high esteem, I mean, I guess within certain spheres of influence that might be true, but in those spheres, it's because we have failed in large case to make the case that we are a better partner. And one of the reasons we failed to make that case is because we've also violated international law. And so countries have seen much less reason to see a difference between China and the US. And I think that is a failing of the US. And I think that we are paying a price for that.
I do think we lost
Right.
moral clarity. I don't think that like BRICS, for example, is like a direct consequence of us like violating international law. I think that's a direct consequence of China's ascendancy and the fact that it is now powerful enough to give a shield to nations that could align themselves with it when it previously couldn't. But in terms of moral clarity, what I think we lost isn't like about saying that international law should be upheld. What we lost was that we used to be clearer about natural law. We used to be clear about saying like, no, free speech is better than no free speech. And if you're a country that has no free speech, that sucks. And we are going to take umbrage with that. Freedom of religion is better than no freedom of religion. And if you are a theocracy, we might take umbrage with that. I think we used to be clearer on that. And while I'm not like completely discounting Wick. I think that there's something to what you're saying. Part of our loss of credibility is that we've lost moral clarity also. I don't know like what we stand for these days, but that's not only Trump. That's been years and years and years.
Related. I think Trump's the symptom, not the disease, honestly.
Mm.
And that's why when people say, "Oh, Trump, MAGA is just going to go away with Trump," I don't think that's necessarily true.
And that's why everyone should stand natural law. Go back to the basics. Our constitutional values, natural law. Let's do it.
Fair enough. And James sends in the Big Ten, says Crackalacken said I should send this, and good job listening to Crackalacken. But you also sent over on the Buy Me a Coffee app a big whopping $50 to complete the goal, so that the chat doesn't get hit for slacking over there. So thank you so kindly. Everybody tell James thank you in the chat. Kokomo, thanks for coming around again. We love you. Sends in a big 15, says this super chat defies international law. Fair enough. Blaster Bot over on Ryan's side sends in 5 gifted memberships.
Thank you, buddy. Enjoy those emotes.
And how do you say his name again?
Rizufso
sends out 10 Raging Tomato memberships. You guys are great with the gifting. And Grassroots, of course, we love Grassroots and his little commentary, sends out 5 Ryan memberships. Congratulations to you. Lucky lottery
I've got
winners.
to do more streams with Pisco because we've proven that Grassroots will spend basically any amount of money to tell Pisco to fuck himself. So I think I need to stream with Pisco more often.
Look,
because
that's the secret.
there's nothing that gets Grassroots to open his checkbook more than seeing Pisco's face.
You bring people on that other people hate, and they will pay to say shit. Okay, that's just how it's done. But
that's fair.
Also, Bros guy's been gifting me stuff too, so thank you for that.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Everyone and giving money left and right, so I do appreciate you, sir.
I love that. Sharing is caring. Thank
That's
you.
That's why you got to do the
gentlemen.
Italian hand.
Lacey sending out not 1 but 2 more to help hit the goal with number 4 and 5. Thank you so kindly. Jason sends a big 10 over on Ryan's side, says, I wonder if Wick wants the U.S. to win. Great win, Ryan. Still undefeated. Ha, ha, ha. Any thoughts to that, Wick? Do you want the U.S. to win?
When the U.S.'s interest comes into conflict with other great powers' interests, I am always on the side of the U.S.
Yeah, but and can we just agree on that real quick? Like, it is very possible to have a reasonable difference of opinion about the conflict in Iran, for example. That there's a lot of things to have a reasonable disagreement about. I think I saw Kyle Kalinske and Hassan this week taking the position that they would like Iran to win.
That would be horrible.
Fuck yourself. Like you like at the very least know what team you're on, right? Like geopolitics is a team sport. You're on a team. You can't root for the other team. That's not how this goes.
And let's just see the results of it. An Iran win, a victory against the U.S. would be astronomically bad, not just for the U.S., but for the world as a whole.
They executed
Iran,
like
just because I don't like how we're conducting ourselves in Iran currently for a host of reasons that we can get into another day, doesn't mean I think that Iran are good guys. Iran is a horrific regime that has massacred its people. I'm glad Khomeini is dead. May he rot. Right. That said, I mean, look, the fact that we didn't know that they were going to close the Hormuz Strait and we didn't really have a plan to deal with that. Come on, gang. Everyone knew they were going to do that. What do you mean you didn't have a plan? Amateur.
Chapingro.
Chapingro.
I'm stuck in the Italian voice now.
It works well for me that you are in that mode because I am not, so it works. Chapingro says Sarah Tomato was amazing as always. Thank you so kindly. The Malali, Ryan folk are very kind over here to me with their nice words. Wix people are good to me too. You all are. You're all very nice. FDN. I've only seen nice things from your chat. FDNY sends in the big 5, says, how have the UN peacekeeping blue helmets done historically in maintaining international law?
Great in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, it's when there isn't a veto, UN Security Council can do some pretty impressive things. The problem is there's always a veto, but occasionally, yeah, there's no veto.
All right. And James is cheating on me again. He has this habit of going around to all the other channels just so he knows I could see the super chats. Cheater. James sends it the big 5 Ryan memberships over there,
Oof.
but then also backs it up too. It says with 1410, he says 5 gifted subs from earlier plus 5 gifted subs plus 14.1 super chat equals 64. Does Wick have more or less than 64 visa stamps in U.S. passport that allows him to visit nice countries and not international law?
I've visited less than 64 countries.
You burnt. He got you.
Yes, he got me.
Bum, bum, bum. And last one I'll read, and then we've got the open panel. They've all been patiently waiting backstage. Jason says the Big Ten says, does Wick honestly think we didn't plan for them closing the strait? Really?
Do you know why I say this? Is because that's what they told the Security Council, the U.S. security people that are going on. That's what the reporting says. They said that they didn't really have a plan for this. They underestimated it. That's what they said. I get the exact quote if you need, right? But this is the report that they're saying. I'm not just saying it out of my ass. I'm saying that the administration is saying this.
I don't know. I mean, Rubio predicted in 2015 that Iran would be investing in a number of things.
But he said Trump was the greatest threat to the U.S. that we've ever seen, too.
Amongst those things that they were investing in was the Swift boats that they're using to attack various ships. And I mean, we did, I remember at the time we blew up that Iranian warship with a submarine, and the people on the left were on X chanting about how that violated international law, which I found particularly funny given the circumstances. So, I mean, I don't think that we didn't have a plan for it. I just think it's been harder than we would have liked it to been. But we have destroyed an enormous amount of their Navy.
All right. Are you gentlemen ready to meet your panel?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's have
Is this a good panel or a tarred panel, Sarah? Be honest.
Let's see.
Oh no, I think that's the answer.
I mean, I've got I don't know. I've got a few solids back there, a few, but it's why it's open panel.
If you donate 100 to Sarah, maybe you can convince her to make rankings for the various Panelverse members on their card scale, so she can have a list about how many Tard points you have, and then you can talk about the average that participates in any given.
Nice. Panel. Well, let's go into full Tard mode. Ready? Here we go. Okay. Did the video play?
It sure did.
I saw the video. It was a good video.
Okay. Is everybody lying to me? Because nothing played on my
end.
It
blacks out on the host side sometimes, but it almost always actually plays on YouTube and for everyone else in the studio.
Ooh. Okay, thank you. Because I get nervous sometimes. I'm like, I can see everybody backstage and on screen, but my video's not playing, but everybody's muted. Like, what is going on? All right, so here's how we do the first part of Gauntlet. Most of you are very familiar with this portion of it, but we're going to play very nicely up front on the first piece of it. And then afterwards, when we go into full Gauntlet mode, then we move into a complete open floor. Otherwise, I'd like every single person in the room, except for Wick, myself, and Ryan, to mute themselves. And if I give you the talking stick, it is your turn to ask your question. You're going to ask your question, you get your response, small little discourse back and forth, and then we move on to the next person. We're going to try and keep it. Bleh. We're going to try to keep it fairly quick since we're rounding to the 3-hour mark. And then we'll go into full open floor. Okay. So Spin City, I know you were backstage hanging out first, waiting very, very patiently and screaming from the chat. I will leave it to you, sir. Your question.
I'm going to start with a statement and then I'll ask my question. Ryan,
Sure.
You're based. Wick, you're a fucking moron.
Oh.
Anyway, moving on. In true fashion. Anyway, libtard. Define the word
Yes, Trump
ought.
cocksucker. What do you say?
Define the word ought.
Ought. We should.
We ought to
We
should.
should do it. Yes.
Okay, point proven. Move on.
All right. Over to
He got me there. When I say we should follow international law, we ought follow international law. Point proven, I guess. Jesus Christ. I'm so glad. Can I just say, I'm so glad my opponents, right? The people who disagree with me, for the most part, Ryan, you're excluded in this. I like you, Ryan. They're just retards. They're fucking sub-IQ people, right? They're
Well,
the most
I did ask
brain
me what's the
drained,
level of
dumbass,
back here.
bullshit people who make me look like geniuses in comparison. 'Cause I'm
Wick,
not
are you going to drop another Somali comment? Because I've heard
Am
you've been
I?
on this IQ road
Oh,
before, and
fucking
gotta-
please. Oh,
you gotta
fucking
speak, you gotta
please
speak
do.
your language, these
Please
people.
do.
Okay.
All right, let me move on over.
Wick gets spicy
Grim,
when he talks about IQ.
Grim Reaper, I hope you bring up the IQ level of the panel. Please ask your question or make your comment.
Well, I can't really confirm that or deny being British, but I just want to ask, first of all, the moron Wick. You say ought isn't a word, but it actually is. And the thing is, international law can't be enforced by any country or any organization. Therefore, America can do what the hell it likes because no one's going to hold them to account. Why?
Okay.
Because without the Americans and without the other allies, the Second World War would never have been won. And we would have been faced with fascists. Now we're faced with communists. Are you turning around and saying that communists is the right thing to do? We ought not to fight them?
So, one, when did I say that ought wasn't a word?
You didn't.
I know. Why did you claim I
You
just
didn't
did?
actually say it, you implied it, sir.
When did I imply that ought wasn't a word?
You implied that ought wasn't in the international law, and that what the argument was from Ryan was that we don't have to. You don't have to abide by international law, and you're saying that you must. But then you were counteracting yourself by saying, well, we can pick and choose what we want to do. Huh? Doesn't make
Okay,
sense
so I
to
think
me.
you're mistaken.
At one time, I would have looked over to across the pond and gone, we should be following them, right? But with people like you, I question that
Okay. So
because
first of all-
you are not getting it right
okay.
at the end of
so
the
first
day.
of
I'm
all-
I'm
sorry.
going to let them have fun, sir. I'll be right back.
Sure, take your
So-
time.
First of all, I think you are making a mistake because my disagreement here with Ryan is he says ought comes from another place other than international law. And I, again, don't think that matters. I think that regardless of where the ought is and where it comes from, it still exists. So I'm not implying it doesn't exist. I am reifying its existence. And again, should and must are different questions. I do not claim, and nor did I say here, that we must apply or comply with international law. In fact, I have said on several occasions that there are instances where I would not comply with international law under certain circumstances. It's not a suicide pact, man. Like, so it just gives me pause when you get every single statement that you have made about what I have said just wrong. It's as if you haven't been listening.
Oh, I've been listening. I just find it absolutely amazing that an American doesn't want America to win. I'm sorry.
I directly said not 10 minutes ago that I want America to win.
No, that was 10 minutes ago.
The way we win is by beating China and beating Russia and beating our adversaries through not just hard power, but soft power. And one of the ways that we extend our soft power is when countries trust us to be honest and to keep our word, which is one of the things that we do when we comply with international law. We have agreed and signed to a treaty saying we would act in X manner. And to the extent that we act in X manner, it shows that we are a trustworthy ally and that they can rely on us and our word. Well, that is wanting America to win.
Okay, so all right, and I'll give you that. You want America to win.
Yes.
Right? Would you justify the means? Or
not
do you think
in every
that
case. Like, I wouldn't rape a baby for America to win.
Nobody's asking you to do that.
Why would you even fucking say something that stupid?
I don't think the ends necessarily justify the means. And I gave
Why
you
would you even say
example.
something like that?
Hold on, Spin. What did I say about everybody's mic? Thank you.
Why would I say something like that? To give a clear example, an extreme example where I don't think the ends justify the means. Answering your question on do the means justify the ends? No, not necessarily. Like, I wouldn't do anything.
Okay,
to win.
But
the means of justification.
He did say that if there was a situation where international law said X, and I gave him the hypo, international law says X, it's contrary to U.S. interests. Should the U.S. nonetheless do X? He said no. Now, to me, like if you think that U.S. ought follow international law, that seems like a little bit of a problem for his side of the argument. But he was taken to prompt to mean something somewhat different. But I think he did concede that if it was not in our interests, we should ignore international law.
Yeah, but my argument again is that in general, our interest is in following natural law, that we should follow natural, not natural law, international law.
Okay, so can I ask you a silly question then? A totally silly question, going back in time, right? Okay, fantastic, love it. When there was the invasion to secure weapons of mass destruction, you can remember that far back, I'm sure you're old enough to,
Sure.
Would you have said that that was justified?
If they had weapons of mass
when
destruction
no weapons were found?
Okay. The
They weren't
reason
found, were
the
they?
Iraq war was a problem for me is because they lied to us about why we were going in, right? They said that
Would
there was
that be legal?
mass destruction. And if they had been, because there were treaties at the time where Iraq had UN inspectors come in to make sure that they were complying with these treaties and that they weren't making these weapons of mass destruction. And if, right, they had been in violation of those treaties, it would have been a good thing to enforce those treaties by invading them and punishing them for not complying. It's part of applying teeth to international law. But because that turned out to be a lie that was sold to us and it was not true, that's the problem I have with Iraq. If it hadn't been a lie, I would have a different opinion.
So the question is, was it lawful or not to go in? Did it comply with international?
It violated. I think it violated some international treaties, I believe. But again, the people who decide whether it's lawful or not are not me, right? Don't listen to what I say. Listen to what the international institutions.
You're right. I won't.
All right,
but what I was trying to say to you, what I am trying to get across is that Ryan put a very good argument for the US involvement, right? Whereas you're a little bit more wishy-washy and sat on the fence. That was all. But thank you, Sarah, for letting me up and having a chat. First time up here. I'll try and come again. I'm being over in UK. There's a big time difference, so apologies. I'm going to have to drop.
Yeah, get some sleep. Stay over there.
Some sleep. Yeah. Cheers. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Grim. We appreciate having you. No problem. Sasquatch to you, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. So when it comes to international law, who's going to enforce it? Beyond
I think
that,
the US should.
there's only one enforceable way forward for an international law to exist and be executed on the U.S., and that's if the U.S. starts adding territories. We're the international law in that case. Manifest globalism. Let's do it.
Pax Americana. I'm with you, buddy.
Yeah, truthfully, this is the problem. The problem that we're having is that we created this international rules-based order, and it was designed on the presumption that there would never be a power that could rival us, and then one emerged, and then now all of a sudden the rules aren't looking as good as they used to. And I think that ultimately, geopolitics is a power struggle. That's what it is.
But this is again, and not to retread old ground, but I think one of the reasons that they have been able to rival us is because of our failure to comply with international law that we've set up. And I think that it has weakened us abroad and at home, right? Because as you said, we're in a wave of populism. I don't think that's good for the country. And you might disagree, I don't know, right? But I don't think populism is a good ideology, but our failures on the international stage and to apply the rules to ourselves have led to a populist wave that is, I think, destroying our ability to be involved in conflicts that we need to be involved in.
Well, populism, the analogy I like to give is that populism is a bulldozer. It's not very good at building new institutions, but when you have institutions that need demolishing, it's the tool that shows up. When there's something rotten in Denmark, something has to be done. I think we're in a wave of populism because people are genuinely pretty dissatisfied with the structure of our government right now, and they'd like something to change. I don't know that it has anything to do with international politics. I think that's more of a domestic thing.
Well, I think the Iraq War I would point to is, at least internationally, is the kind
something.
of.
But the thing is though, you can always cherry pick your friends, but China's rise in part was because we didn't freeze them out and we let them get access to the WTO. We let them get access to all this money in the hopes that having them in the international rules-based order would make them a good trading partner, and it did not. So
that was a failure, because one of the criticisms that they had at the time, and I remember discussing this in my high school class actually, is we did not want them to be part of it, or at least some of us didn't want them to be part of it because of their gross human rights violations.
Gross human rights violation. Yeah, of course.
And we were like, this might be a mistake to let them in this manner. And it turns out it was.
Yeah, I think that, if you want to go back to how did this happen to us, I think that was the moment. What we actually should have done is held our ground on that. And of course, I'm a natural law enjoyer, so I'm going to say I think we should have held our ground when we had more leverage over them and said, until you actually look like a real free speech having, freedom of expression having, freedom of association having, natural law enjoying, democracy or republic, take your pick, but one of those two, then we're not trading with you. We don't give a fuck how many Big Macs you're going to buy. I think that would have been the way to solve this problem, but we didn't do it.
To be fair, that's easy to say with hindsight, right? At the time,
same as the TPP. It's the big what if. Yeah.
Yes. But I tend to agree with you. Oh, anyway.
Sasquatch, you look like you were trying to add something else into that.
The whole point of that statement was that there is no constitutional mechanism to subvert American authority over American waters. So, and even when it comes to having oppositional framework with foreign countries, that's handled under war powers and whatnot, not, you know what I'm saying? Once diplomacy is broken down, it becomes war, right?
Yeah, but that's one of the reasons we have these international institutions, is to avoid things like that. And it's one of the reasons
And when they fail.
Sure, but they don't always fail, and I think that's the mistake people are making. And I think that
the point I'm making is when they fail, they no longer have any bearing on the international treaties in question, because once war is declared, all that kind of goes out of the window, with the exception of a handful of Geneva Conventions, or as the Canadians put it, Geneva Suggestions.
Well, we do have multiple treaties, not just the Geneva Convention, how we conduct ourselves during war, and I think that's a good thing that we have these. And to the extent that we violated those, I think it's shameful as a country that we have, especially when it comes to extrajudicial detainments and what was the word? Enhanced interrogation techniques and things like that.
that's
But
the
we had that
waterboarding. Yeah.
during the discussion. But I think that like I've given several examples in this conversation of times where the US has allowed itself to be bossed around, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, by these international institutions and organizations.
Though it is really funny though, because the enhanced interrogation in the Guantanamo Bay era, right? On one hand, we always do this in the US. We see a problem and then we think we solved the problem and it just creates the next one where we say like, oh man, we really can't capture people and put them in Guantanamo Bay and do enhanced interrogation. Oh, well, I guess we better fucking kill them with drones. You know, like we go for like, if we did the same thing domestically, though this is a big tangent, you know, we were like, oh man, there's a segment of the population that just cannot abide by society's laws. Let's put them in mental institutions. Oh shit, that didn't work. Let's put them all in prisons. Oh fuck, mass incarceration, that doesn't work. Now we're trying, let's have them live on the streets and see how that goes. Like, unfortunately, we do have this secular thing where we end up with you solve one problem and then you're like, oh shit, the next one doesn't look so good.
We call that government, sir. That's government.
Yep, I think that might just be what it is.
Fair enough. Effigy, let's move it over to you, sir.
Hello. Great conversation, guys. I love it when it happens that we actually have conversations and topics like this lend more to those kind of nuanced conversations, because I don't feel that there's a hard moral component, and morality is usually what we all get emotional about. But I think I'm with Wick on this, and that the hinge of it, because I'm not a big, like, you know, moral international law, you've got to follow it because it's the good. I agree that we use it in a strategic way, but to me, the hinge point here is interest. So Ryan, I want to ask you a couple of questions, because I think the idea of what you think is interest and what we think is in the national interest, I think that the two things can't always lead to the same place. So is it cheaper to maintain influence through a system of shared rules in diplomatic institutions rather than an influence system where we constantly unilaterally use military intervention and create forever wars? Which of those two is cheaper?
If it works, it's cheaper. The problem was it wasn't working. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't say it wasn't working. It stopped working. When it was working, it was obviously cheaper.
Sure, but don't you think it stopped working due to also some of the things we did? To me, it seems that that international law, like the idea of it is trying to create like a Nash's equilibrium, right? You remember, for those who don't know, you guys remember that movie Beautiful Mind? It's what Russell Crowe explained about augmenting Adam Smith. It's that in a system, you just going for your own interest doesn't get you the best good, but also caring that everybody else gets their good as well will get everybody a better result. And I think that's what international law tries to do, is put us all in a system where not just our interests are getting served, but everyone else's, because it elevates all of them.
I think that's the myth of international law, which I know many people believe in. But I think the myth is that it created a rules-based order that was going to put little countries on equal egalitarian footing with big countries, and it was all going to be fair, and it was going to rise all ships, and we were going to have these international bodies that were going to be fair and impartial, and we'd have the world government, and et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, international law was never designed to do that. When I said it was a feature, not a bug, that the UN is designed the way it is, it was not a bug. The US would not submit to the UN losing sovereignty to the UN.
Sure, but don't you think that even the belief in that helps us? Don't you think just having people believe that helps us? That we can, yes, sure. People, I mean, shit. People, we talk about people believing in myths all the time. From my perspective,
I mean, I think it might have. The problem is ultimately, we can get into. I mean, the problem when you're talking about causation,
because international law, in a way, is kind of like bully on the block, right? You want to get people on your side so that you can have a big group go up to the bigger countries and be like, look, we got all these people, and since we're all reliant on international trade, which has less to do with like the countries themselves and more to do with the businesses that are, doing the international trade. If you can all bully up on them because we're all linked by this international law, that's a really good strategic way instead of like starting a war, right?
If we could have prevented and we can get into the why, and the why, by the way, you'll never answer, because with something as complicated as geopolitics, there's always going to be 100 causal factors, right? So we're never going to get like one factor that did everything. But if you look at the emergence of China and Russia on the world stage, Russia with the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and China as a rising economic power post 2001, if we could have prevented that from happening, I think the US would still be maximally invested in a globally US hegemony favoring international legal order, and that be the position that we were taking. The problem is, whether through incompetence or whatever else, we didn't and couldn't. So as a result, as these rules no longer favor us the way they used to, we are treating them differently, and that's not illogical. That's rational.
Again,
It makes a more chaotic world, right?
Just a couple things that I feel the need. I feel compelled to state that that wasn't a myth, right? Since the establishment of the rules-based order, we have worldwide conflict has gone down. The risk of death in conflict has dropped drastically. Countries
Wait, the myth is that it was a rules-based order, not that it was
poverty, have
followed.
become more wealthy, have become more healthy. Life expectancy has gone up tremendously, and it's not perfect. There are still problems, but the fact that we have the wealth and prestige and power that we have today was directly due, in part, not entirely, but to the emergence of an international, global, world-based order. It's not a myth. Calling it a myth is just ahistorical.
The myth is not that it didn't create prosperity and that it did. I agree with all those parts that you said. The myth was that it was ultimately a rules-based order, because it's a rules-based order for non-great powers. That's what it always was. That's what it was structurally designed to be. Now, it was a useful myth. It was a useful myth. The problem is, when our adversaries, who are great powers, emerged, the fact that it was never true got exposed, because when they started violating international law, there was fuck all that international law could do about it.
But look at the timeline here that you're looking at. You're looking at Crimea, which is in 2014, which is
and
far
China
and
in
away after the
2001.
causal, link that we put in is our failure to follow international rules and based orders and enforce them. From Iraq War, Afghanistan War onward, right? And we look at China, that's a little bit of a different question. It was our failure to uphold
Mm-hmm.
the standards that we had that led to their rise. It was the international order didn't fail us. We failed the international
I just
order.
said all this. If we could have
Also,
suppressed
our politics fractured on international law at some point in the 80s and 90s.
If we could have suppressed China and Russia from ascending the way they did, then we would be more supportive of international law today, but we were unable to. There's many reasons that we were unable to, but that's
I disagree. I disagree because as Effigy stated, like after the Cold War, because we destroyed Russia. As the USSR, because of our
in the
alliances
80s,
and our soft power, we crushed them economically. Reagan won that, as well as the other previous presidents. It was a great victory. And afterwards, the mistake that we made as a country was like, well, now we don't have to follow this anymore because it fulfilled its purpose. And that began our slide to what we have now. It allowed for the emergence of China.
I think you're pegging too much onto the Iraq conflict.
New Russia, right?
I think I think you're pegging too much onto the Iraq conflict. Ultimately, China's rise, I don't think had much to do with that.
Again, that became because of the collapse of the USSR, and we decided we didn't need to follow these strictures anymore.
But I don't think adding China to the WTO and letting them get all this investment money is because of Iraq. I think that was just a bad geopolitical decision.
No, that wasn't because of Iraq. That's true.
But
that happened.
But China's ascendancy is the thing that's truly crippling, is truly creating the problem right now, not the blowout back from Iraq.
Effigy, are you all wrapped up?
Yeah, just one really quick last question. You mentioned sovereignty earlier, and we had in like the 90s and early 2000s, this was a big thing. The Agenda 21 conspiracy people who thought the United Nations was going to send in troops and that we signed away our sovereignty and all that. Do you think sovereignty is more valuable than security and economic stability?
Yes.
Because I don't think you can have
Yes.
all three in a lawless world.
Sovereignty is more valuable than security and economic stability. If you don't have sovereignty, you're not a nation. Sovereignty is what defines a nation. Like, and when you give up sovereignty in exchange for security or economic stability, you are now at the whim of whoever you gave up the sovereignty to. And maybe you get economic security today, maybe you get security today, but that whim could change. And ultimately, America is correct not to let any other nation, not to let any other international body have sovereignty over us. We would be foolish to do so, because once you sign away your power, you have to get it back at the butt of a gun.
All right.
I don't know if I
Miss-
disagree with you on that one. I'm probably aligned, but yeah, that's all I got to ask.
Thank you, Effigy. Mr. Clay, to you, please.
Hey, everybody. I just want to make sure that I'm
Coming
on
in
the.
high.
Oh, am I? Yeah. Testing.
I'll do it on. I'm just meant your volume is coming in really loud. I got you.
Yeah. Test.
I got you on my end. You're good.
Very good. I just want to make sure that I'm operating based on the correct assumptions. Let's start with whether or not we're going to go by all international law. Like, so the U.S. signs a treaty, that's considered international law, correct?
Yes.
If
Generally.
other countries sign treaties that the U.S. does not sign, that's also considered international law, but it is not something that we consider part of our law or our
international law does not require us to be obedient or, I guess, in compliance with treaties that we do not sign. That's part of the idea of international law.
Can I do the law nerd thing just to like, I'm not sure it's gonna be helpful, but just to be as clear as possible.
Very good.
If you sign a treaty, which just means the president signs it, Congress didn't ratify it, then the U.S. is obliged, not obligated, but obliged, whatever that means, not to act contradictory to its purposes. If you ratify it, then you're supposed to do whatever the treaty says, in theory, right?
Okay, so I'm going to assume he meant ratify, right?
Yeah, I was just trying to be.
Yeah.
And then the third category that got brought up briefly in the debate is what's called customary international law, which is where a norm has been accepted so universally that even though there is no treaty, it is considered part of international law. And if I recall correctly, Wick took the position that he would consider that the least binding because we didn't sign the document.
Yep.
Very good. Very
That
good.
is correct.
Okay, so then would this conversation be about all international law, or would it only be regarding the international law in which the U.S. has signed?
I think that for the most part, at least from my perspective, and Ryan can have his own, right? It's from what we have agreed to do, right? What we have ratified, what we have said, we are held to, we are going to bind ourselves to this. And again, we are currently under the remit of 200 such multilateral agreements and many more bilateral agreements where we have not just signed, but have ratified as well. And these range the gamut from things like the Geneva Conventions, even though there are additions to the Geneva Conventions which haven't been ratified, right? But for the most part, we are ratified them. And then it also goes to like things like aviation, right? Where we have ratified treaties like the civil aviation, where there's a set of rules to orbits in space, where satellites go on, and we have agreed to say when we put a satellite into orbit, we're going to let and share its like orbit with everyone else so they don't have collisions and shit like that. It's just really helpful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so and the reason I bring up customary international law is that like I brought up the law of the sea treaty at one point. 169 countries have ratified that. The U.S. has not. It generally complies with it and as customary international law, but we didn't sign it, and of course we did not submit ourselves to the international body that it created. Yeah. So this is where you get international law gets complicated, because there's all these kind of like shades of gray when you get onto the margins, which is a little bit trickier.
And one of the things I'm glad we didn't do in this conversation, I worried we would, right? Because in preparing for this, I realized just how large of a topic this is that you could
It's-
simply find a treaty and poke at it and say, well, what about this treaty? And like, depending on which treaty you picked, I might be like, I have no fucking idea what this treaty is.
Well, but it's also the other nightmare is that like, you know, like when we bombed Libya, we got accused of violating international law by all kinds of people, right? And some of them might have had points, right? It's like, who decides whether we violated international law? It's not. It's often unclear.
That's why I want to ask this question. So let's throw out the customary and the stuff we haven't signed on to.
Just
right?
the science
Let's
stuff.
just focus on the signed stuff. The ought we always comply with those international laws? That's my
Always?
question to Ryan.
Oh,
No, I think Wick would even say no to that because
always is a large word, man.
Yeah.
I would say usually, most of the time, 90%.
So you're
of
saying
cases,
generally, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Generally, you did say that. I do remember that.
I mean,
Okay.
I think
Now-
all, and by the way, to the extent that it's helpful, like all else being equal, I would agree with that, right? If the question is
Right.
what happens when it's not all else equal, like
Right. Okay. So this is the problem that I have with that argument of not always. Article 6 of the Constitution, the second clause, specifically defines treaties along with the laws of the United States, that those are the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, but it also defines that those are also the supreme law of the land. So if you are not willing to comply with those specific ones, then you are actually defying the Constitution. You're not complying with the Constitution. You're not complying with the supreme law of the land.
I don't know that specific article in Constitution. I just don't.
Fair enough.
But
so.
here's the thing, and I think this came up, like how that applies to constitutional law. We have a system in place to decide that. We have
do?
institutional bodies
Yes.
to ameliorate any disagreements that
Yeah.
come. Like, is this binding? Is this not binding?
Yeah, and it's our court. Our
Yeah,
court
our
is
court.
that final.
Our
the
court.
Supreme Court will decide that whether a treaty really is valid on its face or not, right? So, but then of course it would take someone challenging the treaty, so on and so forth. But in the lieu of whether it's legal and lawful, we've established that the Constitution states that it's legal and lawful, and that those bodies must, as long as it hasn't been decided by the Supreme Court, that they must adhere to it. And then the question comes in, ought they adhere to it because it is the Constitution? Ought our government adhere to the Constitution? And I would say yes, in all cases.
Yeah. So what and you'll forgive me because I can't remember the name of the case. I wish I could remember to make this a better point. But the way that this came out is that the Constitution says exactly what Clay says. The Constitution and the treaties are the law of the land. And the court over time actually said, no, the order is like Constitution, federal law, treaties on the same level, state law. And they made a hierarchy.
Right.
So because the Constitution, for example, gives the president purview over international relations, if the president chooses to violate the treaty as part of his constitutional authority, he can do so despite the language in the Constitution, because his constitutional role trumps the language of the treaty. So we ended up going this direction where we said that the laws of treaties cannot supplant the Constitution, whereas Europe went the other direction. They said what ours says literally, though the court went the other way, that the Constitution and treaties are on equal footing. And I actually think it's been disastrous for them.
That's
because now they're
dangerous.
stuck with they're stuck with this like bureaucratic nightmare of a government that will basically put them into managed decline, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Well,
I guess
then
unless they all exit.
my question would be this: do you want your government to have that much power? My idea of the government is to limit the power of the government. The Constitution is to limit the power of the government, not to give it more. So by allowing the president, or the president and the Senate, by the way, it's actually the president and the Senate who chooses those treaties. When when they have that much power where they can basically, at that point, usurp the Constitution, then that's more dangerous than them actually complying with those treaties that they have signed, because that is contractual law. That's
You are 100% right, Clay. Your intuition is dead fucking on, and that's actually the exact reason the Supreme Court gave. Because like, if you want to amend the Constitution, you need a supermajority in Congress and you need 3/4 of the states. But ratifying a treaty is way easier. So if a treaty and the Constitution are on the same level, then you don't need to amend the Constitution. You just ratify a treaty, and then you've changed the Constitution, and no matter what the people say or how they vote, they're stuck with it. So it turned out that you just couldn't have treaties on the same level as Constitution, because it would let the government take this outsized power that it shouldn't have by dressing it up as international relations. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Clay. Based as fuck.
Yay, IQ level raised. Ant, to you, sir.
Wait. Just a quick question. So, did I understand correctly that you would favor a independent international body that would handle overseeing international law?
It would depend on how it looks. I think that the existence of an independent international body that can resolve conflicts between nations, even great powers, would make the world a better place, because it gives an outlet for resolving conflict other than war, which was one of the problems before we had a solid international rules-based order. Is that the only remedy, I should say, for a lot of these countries was just to grab guns and go.
Also, I did want to push back a little bit on the China thing. That happened much earlier than you're suggesting. Really, what the turning point there was Nixon opening up Western markets in the 70s to China.
I think it was with China. There was several turning points. You are correct in that only Nixon can go to China, right? There's a whole meme that did represent a turning point for China in their rise. But I think that there are several places along that path where we could have stepped in and said, I think we're going to enforce our ideas of civil rights and civil liberties, and just how you treat your citizens. And if you aren't able to meet that standard, we're gonna not allow you into the international community.
And
100% agreed. I am not a fan of the CCP and their atrocities against their own people.
Yep.
I think the reason we ended up hyper-fixating on the WTO membership is the WTO was such a good example of an international body that we sometimes comply with and sometimes don't. That we spent a lot of time on the WTO, and then that kind of put the focus on 2001 era. But
another thing about the WTO is that only we have a veto, no one else does.
Oh.
Because we do. We're the big swinging dick on the
Izzy,
block. Who's going to tell us no?
I'm pretty sure. Let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure that the WTO is, again, we are the only country with a veto power here.
I'm going to take you at your word.
I have not heard that before. I don't know.
Let me double check. It might be the IMF.
I would be surprised because they ruled against us. So, like, how did we get ruled against if they have
because we don't always use our veto power when it's in our interest to comply, because there's benefits to complying, even though it hurts us in the short term.
But that's what I mean. They ruled against us and we ignored it. Like, why would we not veto if they?
Because if all we did was veto everything that ruled against us, it would be less of a respected organization, and so people.
Oh no! So sorry. We have a veto in terms of rulemaking, not in terms of adjudicating.
Oh, okay.
So like if we want to make a rule, we have a veto. This is AI, by the way, so please don't take I'm not betting my legal reputation on it. Sure. But if China brings a case and says the US violated the existing rules by putting a tariff on us, we can't veto the adjudication. But if we want to create a new rule, we can. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because we've been asking for economic cyber espionage, and all the things that China does that violates, we think, international law. We'd like to crack down on currency manipulation, IP theft, cyber crimes, and China keeps fucking vetoing. So that would actually make a lot of sense.
Okay.
There you go. I was
Uh,
slightly wrong on the veto. It only applied to one section. My bad.
International law is really big and complicated. That's the
Well,
thing.
that's what I'm saying. I can't be this is one of the things that I was worried about when preparing for this because there's a ton. So
fair enough.
I'm-
And James
anyway, go.
Vagabond, welcome to the panel. I love new faces. You're more than welcome to ask your question to either of the gentlemen.
Yeah. First, I just want to say another great conversation out of Wick and Ryan here. Just good faith as always. Love it. My question was, I actually jumped in late, so I didn't hear the full conversation, but I found it interesting when Ryan was saying that the United States needs to reestablish that it has lethality and that it's a force in the world. And I find it ironic that Republicans had been so loath to want to support Ukraine, which seemed like a place where there was clear objectives and clear, ally versus enemy distinction there. And I feel like if we would have gone any further than we did, the Republicans were fighting us the whole way up to that. Wouldn't they have objected to us, showing that we're a dominant force, even though Ukraine was able to stand up to Russia just with our support?
I'm as hawkish as I've heard anyone be on the internet, and even I don't think that going to war with a nuclear power directly is a good idea. Like, I think that the truth, and this is why Iran can never be allowed to have a nuke. The truth is, once a country has that type of weaponry, certain options are just off the table. I think that, like, when you have great powers with that kind of destructive force, there's a reason it's always proxy conflict, because if you fight directly, who knows where it ends. That said, the US was so soft in 2014 with Crimea, like so fucking soft. And does that mean we should have put boots on the ground then? I think we probably couldn't. I think Russia is a nuclear state. I think that still holds. But
well, perhaps
short
just
of
armed
that,
Ukraine
our response should
harder.
have been catastrophic.
Could we
in
have just
2014.
armed Ukraine harder at least, maybe?
Yeah. Arm Ukraine harder, take proxy retaliation against Russia's allies. Like, I think we should have been
a ton of
we
options
should
we had.
we short of attacking Russia directly, we should have gone hard in the paint in 2014 and crushed Russia at that point. Like, it was a huge mistake not to respond more aggressively than we did, in my opinion. But
And I agree with that. Just to jump in here, I agree with his assessment here. I don't think that means we had to go to war with Russia. I don't think that was on the table. I think that there were plenty of other options that we had. Like he said, taking control of their proxies, attacking their proxies, isolating them further on the world stage, not just through sanctions, but through removing some of their interests that were abroad, not in their home territory. Plenty of options. And again, we had the power to do so. We decided not to, and that was a mistake.
Yeah. I almost wonder if at that moment in 2014, if there was will to do something like, let's figure out whether Russia's really going to be part of the UN going forward. Like, there's no legal mechanism, by the way, by which you could do this, because the Security Council has a veto. But, like, would there have been some appetite to be like, look, if you're invading your neighbors for territorial wars of aggression, you don't get to be in the UN anymore. Like, reshuffling of the world order that actually took into account what was happening.
I don't know if there would have been a public appetite for that, but one of the things that we do in America, and I think this is a good thing, is certain decisions aren't made democratically in America. And I think that's good. And one of the things is we don't vote on foreign policy directly and how things, we vote on representatives. And I think that one of the responsibilities a leader has, especially a second term leader like Obama, who wasn't up for re-election, like, one of the responsibilities they have is, if you know something needs to happen, even though there might not be public appetite for it and you might pay a price electorally, you should do it anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we fumbled there, and then the withdrawal of Afghanistan, which was like a well documented fumble. The Syria fumble that we talked about. We had a few pretty major fumbles on the highest
There's been
level
a
of
lot
the
of
world
fumbles.
stage.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of fumbles in the last 20 years, 30 years, in fact. But
Well, if I can cope
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
behalf of Obama in not going further on Ukraine, that would have cost significant, political capital and could have alienated a huge amount of the voter base at a time where he had a slim margin to begin with and it was evaporating by 2014.
maybe, yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
it's hard to. It's not something I could give you a clear, definitive answer.
Yeah.
on
Yeah, it
how
would be
much
like, yeah, if
cost
we
it
can
would
make
be.
the decision in a vacuum, then great. We'd all like to help Ukraine more, but as it stands, the world is, you got to contend with things.
Well, this is what I meant about America kind of losing its moral clarity. I think that there was an era where we, for better or worse, took the position where it's like, no, like we actually do have this vision of natural rights. We do have this vision of like how people should live and what the right way to do things is and what a functioning democracy looks like. And we were attempting to be forceful about that. And then like flash forward to 2014, they're like, oh, you're conquering Ukraine. I mean, difference of opinion, I guess. It's just, like we'll give you some sanctions, see what happens. And it's like, I don't, it unfortunately just doesn't work. Like we have competing, the Russian worldview, the Chinese worldview, and the US worldview are not compatible. They are diametrically opposed worldviews, and it's an influence and power struggle, and we have to be honest about that.
All right. The gauntlet is officially open. That channel is up, running, and live now. I've dropped the link into the Raging Tomato chat if you want to start moving over there now, or you'll catch the raid from there. If you're watching on the Raging Tomato side, I am shutting that side down now. To you, gentlemen, the floor is officially open. If anybody wants to jump in and add in some other thoughts, if you would like to join open panel, if you were didn't make the first cut and you want to jump on now's the time to do so. We do have one spot on panel open. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until somebody leaves or gets booted. All right, it's open. Spin City, I know you were kind of frantic over there during some spots. You wanna start jumping in?